Hey, welcome to a brand new episode of the Woodprinter Podcast. This is your host, Steve. Today's guest is Randall Williams from Fireside Sawmill. How you doing, Randall?
Hey, I'm doing great.
So tell me your origin story. How did you get started with Fireside Farm and Sawmill?
Yeah. So I guess the farm part of the business started first. My wife and I moved out outside of Chapel Hill in Durham onto 9 acres to start a homestead together. At the time, we were teachers and we wanted to live a life where we were growing our own food, raising livestock, and kind of tending to our community in that way. And I had this problem of these giant pine trees right behind the house. And so, of course, I called a forester who came out and looked at them. And I talked to a logger who gave me the only option would be to clear cut the area. And to me, this was devastating. Like, why would I move out into the country, into a bucolic wooded landscape to have all the trees then cut down? And so I decided that I was going to fell the trees myself and mill them up with a manual push mill that I had not yet bought. And one of my neighbors who had a sawmill came over to consult with me. And he looked at the trees, and we're talking probably 40 100-foot tall, 26-inch diameter pine trees. And he says, you know what, this is going to take the rest of your life, but you could do it. And so he said, here's what I'll do. I'll sell you my old sawmill. And at that point, I bought his LT40 and I brought it to my property. And he was right that the hydraulics on the machine made it possible for me to mill all that lumber. And so then I started using lumber on our property for our home projects. And at that point, people started bullying me to mill their lumber. And so at the time, I was teaching at a Quaker school in Durham. And on the weekends, I was milling lumber for other people. And that kind of started the process where I started selling lumber and then coming up with a fee structure to be able to mill for other people. In 2017, my wife and I both left our jobs teaching and went all in on the farm. And at that point, I ramped up the sawmill operation, which has been going full time for the last 4 years. And so that's it kind of takes us to now where I have the farm operation. My wife grows cut flowers for mostly weddings. And on the sawmill side of things, I run a portable sawmill business. I service a 25-mile area around our farm. And with that, I offer, I have 2 track loaders, a Lucas wide slab mill, an LT40, the Granberg mill.
Alaskan mill.
Yeah. And so with those tools, I usually stay about 8 to 12 weeks booked out. And so the
Wow.
demand is crazy high. So at this
Wow.
point, my business.
So you still have the LT40?
Yeah, that's my primary mill. Oh, I'm sorry. I should have changed that. So the original mill that I had from my neighbor, the mid 90s era, I traded in 2 years ago for a brand new LT40.
Okay.
And I'm getting ready to add a second LT40 and a second Sawyer to the operation so I can deal with some of this backlog. Demand so high.
Wow. Wow. What do you attribute that the demand is just like staying consistent?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a couple things. Number one, like from a macroeconomic standpoint, we have a lot of people moving into Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, buying 5 to 10 acres and wanting to have a homestead farm immediately. So a lot of the work that I'm doing is for people who are clearing lots and realizing that it costs a lot of money to haul and to deliver those logs to the landfill. And they're rightfully upset that it costs more to dump the logs than it is to process it. And so I do a lot of work, which is like multiple day jobs, like 150 pine trees, over 2 weeks, and get people set up for building their homes and their barns.
And you're felling those trees too?
Depending on the scale, I'll recommend different arborists or excavation companies.
Okay. And I guess those first couple of years, like how did you build up your name so that, well, how did people start bullying you until
Yeah.
to mill their own stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think there are two things that I think have been critical in building my business. The first is being a member of my local community. So I've been in this area for 25 years. You know,
Mm,
I've taught a lot of students. My wife has been a teacher for 26 years in the same area, and so just
mhm.
the kind of networking of being in the farm community and the university communities around here. You know, there's no lack.
Yeah.
The second
Are
part,
you originally from North Carolina?
kind of sort of, yeah. I grew up in Charlotte, born in
Okay.
Nashville,
Okay.
Tennessee, and grew up in Charlotte. The
Okay.
second part of that early stage, I think, and this is what I wish I had heard on an early podcast, is that my transparent fee structure, where I lay it all
Yeah.
out on the table so that somebody who comes to the website knows can figure out exactly how much a project is going to cost. That's been
Yeah.
absolutely important, and that's especially important for my market, which is a very educated consumer base, right? Duke,
Yeah.
the NC State, like we have so many people who will do a 20-minute deep dive on my website to understand what it takes to mill and use their own lumber.
Mm, that's really interesting. I mean, for a couple of people that I know, they got tired of answering the same questions over and over. And so for them, it was like, let me put it up. It's just very transparent. And that's actually reassuring to hear because I feel like uh, there's like a little bit of fear attached to putting your prices out.
Yeah.
Right.
Huh?
And so, I mean, listen, Amazon and Gap, they put their prices out. Like, why can't you put your prices out unless you're, that you have different prices for different people, which is, gouging. But, the idea is that you need to be transparent about. I like that. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So you find that when you over-educate people on the front end, they come to you already sold.
Yep. I mean,
That's so cool.
it's very clear on the web. So on my website, there's a page called Process and Pricing, and it shows you
Yeah.
the formula of coming up with the estimate. And then at the very end,
Yeah.
I actually have a page of spreadsheets that someone can look and say, okay, I know I want his track loader, I want his Lucas mill. There are two
Mm,
logs. He thinks he can probably do this in 4 hours. Therefore, the price is X.
that's great. That's great. And then, so then you got busy. At what point did you just do this all on your own and you started bringing in help, or were you still on your own till now?
Yeah, I mean, I think having had a head start on the farm business, I realized
Hmm.
that taking on employees is a commitment. It's
Yeah.
and so you have to be present for them, motivate them, give them a stable income, support them
Hmm.
in training and their development. And so far at this point, I've realized that that's too much for me and my sawmill business. That I work solo.
Yeah.
I work solo.
Yeah. 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 And it seems like just based off your website, like you stay pretty focused on milling lumber.
Mhm.
And are you drying and selling too, or just milling for other people?
So I'm in the process of building a Niles kiln. Um,
Okay,
the, the excavator is here today, flattening the ground for it. Um,
great.
I think when I first started, I started selling live edge slabs on uh,
Hmm.
on the weekends because that was kind of the low hanging fruit. You get a
Yeah.
higher price board foot. There's not a lot of commercial competition. It's a higher
Hmm.
return based on per sale,
Hmm.
and it is an easy entrance to a woodworking business where you can put some steel legs on it, polish it up, and then have a value added product. And I think
Yeah. Yeah.
really important to me in the beginning to get my cash flow started. And what's
Hmm.
funny that 4 years in or so, or I would say 3 years in, I started to realize that I was actually making more money milling than I was in that upselling of the live edge slabs. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that happened because of the externalities that I was not accounting for when it comes to woodwork. I was doing
Mhm.
custom woodwork and having a meeting, talking about the client with design, and then making it, delivering it, and all of that kind of stuff. I was losing my time hand over fist.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
decided that until I could streamline my woodworking business, I would just put it on pause. And so I'll re
Yeah.
I'll reintegrate that at some point again. But that there's enough cash flow for me right now in the sawmilling that I don't need to take on custom woodwork projects.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that too, just because, like, anytime you add a new product or service, there's like a steep learning curve. There's added costs, not just in terms of time, but in terms of added equipment.
Yep.
And then I often found too. So, like, I mean, because I feel like with like the whole woodpreneur life cycle, it's like, all right, maybe you have a mill and you start milling and you start selling green stuff. Maybe you get a kiln and you start selling dried lumber, and then you're like, you know what? I could sell a table for $3,000 to $5,000, but then it takes your mind off of the stuff that brought you to this point, and then you feel a little bit behind. Then you feel overwhelmed, um, and I like, I'm always, I have a thing that I like to say is like, the longer you hold on to the piece of wood, the more money you can make from it, right? Because then you can keep adding. But sometimes, I have an old client. He has a 6-figure sawmill business, and literally that's all he does. All he does. He has no time for anything else. He has no time. He doesn't even have time to sell lumber, right? Like, because he's so booked out.
Yeah.
And so he mills for people and they air dry. It's like, hey, just check on it in a year or two. And because it's like he lives in a very densely populated area. You have people that don't want to just chip up these beautiful trees that are on their property, but they want to hold on to something. And so that's really, really smart. You didn't get you know, you didn't get sidetracked with your business. That's really that's really smart. But how are you? So you said you're gonna add a Nile kiln. How else are you looking to grow your business? Like, what does the path look like for you? Oh, and you said you're gonna add another mill and another sawyer, right? And that's probably going to be like a day, like a freelancer, right?
Yeah, yeah. So just to backtrack to one thing that you just said that I wanted to point out is that, like, the advice that people hear or the business stories that people hear on podcasts, I think it's important for me to note that my sawmill business is doing well within this Raleigh Durham context, and that is also
Yeah.
people like my friend Avery at Wild Edge Woodcraft is doing a great job at live edge slabs and tables.
Yeah.
And I have the Hardwood Store of North Carolina, which is a very important, reputable, and awesome business that's selling hardwood and delivering it to all the local carpenters. And so,
Yeah.
it's like we're finding our niches within the local economy.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. That's so
So
cool.
I
That's
guess
so cool.
your second question was about growing and the second Sawyer. Um, there and where I see it growing. The first is that you get a higher rate of return. I'm seeing a higher rate of return on lumber than on sawmill services. So
Okay.
if my LT40 is generating between 350 and 500 board foot per hour, and we
Mm-hmm.
know the price of pine locally is $1.25 per board foot, you're generating between $400 and $600 in lumber per hour. And if my hourly
Yeah.
rate is 95 plus some change for setup and whatnot, you can see that there's greater growth potential in lumber than there is in sawmill services. But
Yeah. Yeah.
the amount of equipment, space, drying, transactions, all of those kind of things make it harder to access the money that you could potentially get in lumber. So that includes like
Yeah.
drying sheds, barns, gravel, communications, insurance, delivery, like all of those kind of things gum up where that return on investment is. So you can't really realize it that quickly. So what I'm hoping is that a second Sawyer will enable me to start generating an inventory of lumber for when I get that scale and can start thinking more about lumber than sawmill services.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the first part of that answer.
Yeah. No, I get it. It's more about like you're planning for the future. So like one is for current jobs that's bringing you money, and then the other one is using existing logs and milling those in anticipation for, to be able to sell.
Yeah. And the second part of that is that, when you talk about a resilient business, you have to think in competencies, right? Like you can't have many single points of failure. And anyone who owns a sawmill or a business knows that, you could have one drive motor go out, and with the supply chain as messed up as it is, you could be out of work for 4 weeks. And the same is the same is true with your body, right? Like you're back moving something and suddenly you don't have income for 6 weeks until you heal. And so having 2 sawmills, 2 track loaders, like I at least have built some resiliency into my business.
Have you read Anti-Fragile?
No, but I've heard about it. Yeah.
Okay. This is a great book everybody should read. Yeah. It's so heady. It's such a heady book. It's called Anti-Fragile by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. And he talks about building anti-fragility as a framework. So, the example is like, if you put a glass in a box, like a glass jar in a box, and you kick around the box, it'll break, right? Obviously that's fragile, right? And then if you put some wrapping around, like protective wrapping around your glass, and you kick it around, it'll protect it. So that's resilient. If you put the glass and then you kick it around, put the glass in the box, you kick it around, it changes, but it somehow gets stronger. That's anti-fragile.
Yeah.
And so I'm a big fan of anti-fragility and even building resilient business. It's about putting hedges in it's like you put stops in your business to make sure that if anything happens, like your body or anything, that you can adapt, right? And so, so that idea of anti-fragility, can relate to any, like your business, your marriage, your life, just any communities in general. And so, that's really cool. That's awesome. And so tell me quickly about what's the farm. So you said your wife's farm business, she does wildflowers for weddings.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we have an acre in production, and we specialize in wedding flowers.
That's awesome. Awesome. And both of you do this full time?
Yeah. And to speak to that anti-fragility kind of mindset, our businesses are complementary in the sense that, flower production is subject to the weather. And so we can have a hurricane come through and knock us out during October, which is like our busiest wedding season. But that same hurricane that comes through also increases my business because there are all the trees.
Because the trees get down.
And when it's July,
really cool.
And when it's July, and I'm like, man, it's 105 degrees outside. I'm not feeling it. Her business is rocking and rolling, and the flowers love it. So it's nice to have two incomes too. That's It's been
That's cool. That's very, very cool. Awesome. All right. So this is a part of the interview where I talk to you about or give you any marketing or business advice. And I'd love to, is there anything that you think that I could help you with, or, that could serve you and potentially serve the woodpreneur community?
Yeah, I think, when you just ask kind of how I see my business growing,
Yeah.
I want to tell you about a philosophical reason why I transitioned away from building tables and to doing framing lumber, right? Because that was hard, because I was making, you're moving from a price per board foot of $7 to $11.50 a board foot to $1.25, and part of it is because, like, we're in the midst of a housing crisis in America, where the median home is $360,000. In my area, a median home price is $460,000. So when I look at my sawmill, it's a tool that can be used for a lot of different purposes. I could build a 17-foot walnut table, and it will be an heirloom piece that would be appreciated by that family in that living room. Or I can take on the challenge of using my sawmill, of diverting lumber from the waste stream, turning it into a valuable product, and then figuring out how I can offset lumber costs for first-time home buyers. And this is especially important to me because I live in a farming community, and I'm watching eager young people get out onto their land and realize that the logs that are next door are being felled and taken to the dump, while they're having to go to Lowe's or Home Depot and buy really crappy lumber and go into debt to their bank for the next 30 years. Like, that's a travesty.
That is a travesty.
So from a spiritual and a moral mission, I felt like it was important to pivot to framing lumber, to solving a big systemic problem. And so with the help of Wood-Mizer Carolina, and then in the State Home Builders Association, we developed a bill that was in the General Assembly the last HB 141, the Promote North Carolina Sawmills Act. And this would give sawyers the skills and the right to self-certify their own lumber for coated building construction. Now, this would be a game changer for the local industry, right? Because when I mill for somebody, after costs, I can save someone 2/3 of their lumber costs for their home. So this bill was supported by both Republicans and Democrats in the House and passed unanimously. Got to the Senate, where it died in a committee where the head was in the pocket of the lumber industry. The lumber industry. And so, because the way that North Carolina General Assembly works, we go long session, short session, and it won't be until 2023 when we can promote this kind of legislation again. But at that point, here's what I hope: that we will have a comprehensive green building legislative package that would include things like more environmentally friendly footprints, building practices, straw bales, alternative building, where we can actually talk about sustainability and not, building homes that have so much waste in every part of their construction. So I guess what I want to tell you and what I need help with is, when I started doing that policy work, I found the community of sawyers, and at least in North Carolina, to be to be disconnected and fragmented. And so what I want help with is building up the kind of community of sawyers in my area, so that when legislation like this comes about, we can all work together on it.
Wow, Randall. I did not expect that. That's so cool. And you have it on your website under policy and advocacy.
Yeah.
That is potentially really huge with very large national implications. And I guess my first thing is, Have you connected with Urban Wood Network?
Mm. I think that I'm on their email list and I follow them on Instagram.
So they should at least know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing. The second thing is I think Avery has a group, or you should have a group or with Avery, and just dump every single Sawyer into that Facebook group.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the first thing. The second thing is have a party together.
Yeah.
Right? So that was the third thing. Third thing is have a party together. Have a holiday party.
Mm-hmm.
Have a North Carolina Sawyers holiday party.
Yeah.
It's October, it's end of October. Have a party together. And even if you wanted to do a Zoom meetup, because nobody wanted to meet up, have a Zoom meetup. I'll even come and I'll talk at that Zoom meetup to just talk about business. You can talk about your thing. Avery can talk about his thing, like whatever, right? Like that's the third thing. The fourth thing is people, as it relates to legislation and it's all about economic impact.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just say, okay, there are 100 Sawyers, right? And, if you say 100 Sawyers and you say, I'm just saying, 200 Sawyers, the amount of wood that is being diverted, that's a metric in impact. The amount of carbon being diverted from the environment, right? Carbon sequestration, that's that. The dollar amount, that's that. The dollar amount generated per business, that's a metric. The taxes from the sales, that's a metric. The money going back into the local economy, that's a metric, right? And then if you can position it to say, look, this is what big lumber industry is doing. All we're asking for is this small percentage. We're not taking any money away from anybody. We're actually throwing money back into the economy and diverting it for the waste stream, like diverting it, we're sequestering the carbon so that it's not ending up in landfills. And then also too, if you could say, look, you have all these trees from urban areas. This is money that could be brought back into. And then if you can tie it back to like the education system, yes, we're going to educate kids on this. And then the impact on the, the environmental curriculum there, and then the school education. Oh, and then the health of young people, so that's the other thing. So the other thing, when you started talking about this before we started recording, I was like, there's a guy named Dr. Claude Anderson, and this is a wood industry podcast. So for those that don't know, I'm Black, right? So I'm Black. And so there's this guy named Dr. Claude Anderson, and he is all about Black economics, Black power, and he has this thing, it's called the 5 levels. The 5 levels to overcome oppression or just overtake whatever, like how you dismantle, institutions. And it applies to this. It totally applies to this. So the first is money. First, you need money, right? It's all about economics, right? That's the first level. It's money. So how could you get money behind this? It's like, one is start a membership group where everybody pays $100. Maybe that's the start. And then the other thing is maybe you get a bunch of local businesses that could benefit, that could sell this lumber, that could buy your lumber. Maybe they kick in $100. Everybody kicks in $100. You have $10,000, just a number that's out there, right? Have some fundraisers. Maybe the December thing is just a fundraiser, right? That's the first thing. The second level is a politician. Dr. Claude Anderson says you need to either buy a politician or rent one. So this next thing is, now that you have your money from this group, then you need to find a politician and you need to donate to their thing. and you need to either, or if they don't not down with you, then you need to find somebody that is, and then fund their election and raise money for your cause, right? That's the second thing. Did I just say to buy or rent a politician? Yes, I did, because that's what you should do, right? The third level is the legal and court system, right? So from there, once you have, I'm sorry. The first is money. Second is politicians. The third is the courts and legal system. Find a way. So once you have that, then you start influencing and shaping policy, right? The fourth level is the media. So having your own Facebook group, have your own Instagram, buying ads, right? Like buying like radio ads, Facebook ads, YouTube ads, like doing ninja stuff. Like anytime anybody puts, a politician's name in Google, right? It all goes to your ads about your cause, right? Anytime anybody puts like a lumber thing, it goes to your, right? Like how to build a home in North Carolina, or buying, right? It should go to your website. And then, so that's and then the fifth level, which everybody thinks is the first, but it's the fifth, is education, right? Once you have the media, then you start educating people. Schools, trade schools, start doing tours with kids, right? Like all of those places. So that's what I would do. Was that helpful?
All those 5 levels kind of create a feedback loop because they're supporting each other.
They're supporting each other. But it all starts with, if you can get the money and then find a politician and then get them in your pocket. Find somebody get them in your pocket. But go to them with all of those metrics. This is the economic impact. This is this. Like, this is the taxes that the state would get, right? And if anything, literally build a home, use it, and then make these, collaborate with all these sawyers to actually build a home and have that be the prototype, and invite politicians to come through. Yeah. Invite local legislators, business, chamber of commerce. Like, hey, chamber of commerce, or the secretary of commerce for the state, invite them. Yeah. Start a Twitter, start tweeting all of them.
Yeah. Well, if anybody's interested in this kind of work, I'm happy to talk with them offline about the different projects that I'm working on that are kind of like the spec projects for this kind of work. So I'm working with Habitat for Humanity right now on a building project.
Awesome.
We're trying to offset lumber costs for their building projects with lumber milled from their sites.
Awesome.
And so working with the University of North Carolina to take the trees that are on campus that then go to a lot to actually repurpose that to be reintegrated into the campus. So there are all these things that are
exciting work. That's exciting.
It's happening. We haven't hit critical mass yet.
Yeah, you need the people behind you. You need the people, and then you need to convert those people into money and through some sort of membership, and literally call Avery when we get off the phone and say, hey, Steve told me that you started a group, or you want to start a group. Yeah. Let's collaborate together, and then just get everybody in that group. Literally get everybody in that group.
Cool. Yeah.
And then by the end of this year, have a holiday kickoff party. And tell everybody to plan.
And hopefully we won't fight over barbecue.
Yeah. Cool.
That's it. That's
very cool.
East versus West.
Awesome. That's so cool. Any last bit of parting advice for the Woodpreneur community?
Not really. I've really enjoyed our time together, and if any of your listeners want to keep in touch with me, they can follow me on Instagram on Fireside Sawmill. And also, if there are any sawyers out there who are curious about different fee structures, check out my website, firesidesawmill.com. And I'm happy to chat with somebody as they kind of set up their own operation. yeah, I'm here for the broader community.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Randall. That was awesome.
Yep. Great talking with you.